Welcome to the She Will Shine podcast, where we bring you the real stories of female business owners. My name is Danielle Price and I'm the founder of She Will Shine, a supportive business network for women. It's time to give a voice to women in business and discover their journey.
Hi everyone and welcome to the She Will Shine podcast. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which we record our podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have the lovely Casey Benjamin with us. How are you, Casey?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me in your beautiful community and today on the podcast, Danielle. I'm very excited to chat with you.
It's a pleasure. I'm really excited for our conversation too. For those who may not know Casey just yet, she is a self-leadership coach for business owners and professionals at the Courage Project. With a major in psychology, a minor in sociology, and a master of teaching, Casey has always been fascinated by the nature versus nurture debate. Now that research has settled that debate, Casey is passionate about helping individuals understand their own nature, as well as the effects of nurturing influences. After gaining clarity on these influences, she helps her clients access their full potential by optimizing their environments and living into their strengths. I can't wait to find out all about that soon, Casey, because as you know, I am fascinated by what you do. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you, did you ever think that you would be a business owner? Did you have like aspirations as a young person?
Looking back, I was really quite entrepreneurial. So I had the good fortune of having a father who had his own business, or he was starting his own business when I was about 8, I think. But even before then, I was always trying to make little businesses. Teaching was always a part. So I would teach my brother and, my stuffed toys and things like that. So there was that in it. But then, I used to make little stress balls and things like that. And I'd sell them at my dad's work. And, I was always trying to get my friends to start a babysitting business and things like that. So I think the signs were there that I was quite entrepreneurial. I don't know that, that has necessarily helped me too much, because there's still so much that that I need help with, as a business owner as well. So I think it's in my spirit, but, what I've really discovered this past year is that I can't do it alone and I really need a team around me to support me. So collaboration is where it's at for me.
Oh, 100%, 100%. I want to go back to your education. You said that you were obviously teaching your siblings and things, what you were doing. So was that like a natural progression then, kind of like in high school, you sort of thought, this is what I enjoy, and it was an easy decision for you to make to go in that path?
It really wasn't. Having a dad my dad was a lawyer, and he kept encouraging me to do law. I think because I used to argue with him a lot. And so he just thought that that was my natural nature and that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up coming out of uni. I started off in arts because I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. And I had fallen in love with psychology at school. And so then I was kind of looking at the teaching course, but I was like, oh, I'm not 100% sure. And then, it's kind of hard to work out what you can do with an arts degree. So I transferred into arts law. And then, through that process, I'm very much a learn through mistakes kind of person. And so, I got 3 years into the law degree and just thought, I just find this so dry. I know it's really fascinating and really exciting to some people, but it's just not for me. So I kind of moved out of that, took some time away, and then I kind of went, okay, I'm going to go back to what I loved as a kid, and that was teaching. And that's when I did my Master of Teaching. So it wasn't kind of like, a natural or a linear progression at all, which is kind of me. I kind of do things in a bit of an experimental way.
So there's a lot of years of university studying. If you were going through arts, then 3 years of law, and then a Master's of Teaching. So you obviously love the learning aspect, because I don't know if I could do that. That's a lot of years at uni.
If I could be a professional student, I probably would, and I suppose that's why I've chosen work that, is constantly developing and there's always new things to learn, because I just love learning. I'm just a naturally curious person. So, I feel like I don't have enough years and time on earth to learn all the things that I want to learn. So
did you do primary or secondary teaching?
I taught primary. I loved the teaching part of it. The data and the analytics and the report writing is not really within my natural strength. So I burnt out in teaching. But I loved being with the children. I loved the classroom culture. I loved helping them recognize their strengths and collaborate together. So yeah, I've kind of brought that into the work that I do now. I just do it with adults. And sometimes I kind of feel like when I'm looking at people, especially in the corporate work that I do, they're just kids in suits, really. They're just, you can kind of see the inner child in them as well. So it's essentially the same thing. It's just that they've got suits on.
Oh, that's an awesome way to look at it. I think that's a really, you kind of take away the walls that people put up.
Absolutely.
And see the real person underneath.
100%. And I think that's one of my strengths as well. And I noticed that even just this week, I've had a few reminders. I'm a very honest, authentic person, and I'm pretty quick to be vulnerable in front of people. And I think that lets people know they can let their guard down, and that they don't have to have a pretense around me. And that's where we know from Brené Brown's work that when we're vulnerable, that's where connection happens.
Yeah, we see that every day at She'll Shine, as you would know. I know that you started a chocolate business. Can you kind of take us through that progression from teaching to chocolate?
When you look at it, you're like, what a weird bunch of things for one person to do. But I can kind of see the common threads throughout. It was when I was on maternity leave, and I had previously thought, I'm going to have 6 children. I'm going to be a stay-at-home mum. So, when I went on maternity leave from my teaching position, I was just like, here, this is the life I've created. It's finally here. I can't wait. 3 months in, I was going crazy, and I was like, oh my gosh, this does not suit me. I'm getting bored. I need something for myself. And I really didn't want to go back to teaching. So the chocolate business was kind of a bit of my exit out of there. And so I was like, okay, I had a lot of drive to kind of make it work, to be able to bring in enough money to ensure that I didn't have to go back to my teaching job. And I've always loved food. I used to make chocolates as a little girl for family friends in the little molds and stuff like that. I loved doing that. I love food, and particularly chocolate. And I was really, really health conscious at that time. And I had, developed my own recipe that I just loved, and I shared it with my mother's group. And they were like, this is amazing. You need to sell it. And I was like, oh, do you think? I just thought it was something that I liked. But they gave me that confirmation. And so they said, oh, you should do an Easter stall at our local farmers market, the Kyneton Farmers Market in the Macedon Ranges. And so, I did a little bit. I very quickly, I'm very good at doing things very quickly. And so I, got all of the things across that I needed to do, checked everything, had all my regulations sorted. And within I think it was a month or something like that, I had a little chocolate stall at the farmers market, and I sold out within 2 hours. And people were like, that's not normal. People don't usually sell out. This is a thing. You should, keep going. And so, it just grew from there. And it was really fun. And it was probably, I'd lost a lot of confidence in teaching, I think, because I was doing a job that required me to do something that was out of my natural strengths with the data and the analytics. The teaching, great. I would have been great with another teacher that was really good in that bit. But, through that process, and I think also, I know a lot of people who become parents feel this, that kind of loss of identity a little bit. So my 100%. Chocolate business was that thing for me that really helped me to have something for myself. And there were always challenges. So I was constantly coming up against those challenges and just amazing myself at how I could overcome them and be resourceful and find ways through. And I think it was because I had such drive that I really didn't want to go back to teaching, because it was making me so unhealthy. Yeah.
And I think, as you said, you had such drive. So while those challenges were there, rather than seeing them as roadblocks, you were just like, okay, well, what do I have to do? I have to get past this. What do I have to do? And you just did it. So many of us can so easily stop at those points and go, it's all too hard. I'm not doing this anymore.
Absolutely. I think for me, even now in my business, I'm coming up against roadblocks like that, and I'm not as resourceful as I used to be. And that's what I'm trying to sort of tap into a little bit more. But it's just that next level. I feel like, I always thought that there would be this point that I'd get to where I had it all figured out and everything was perfect and I'd learned all my lessons and then life was going to be easy, like the
I think
Disney
we all
fairy
had that.
Yeah, but I've come to realize that that's just not going to, there's always going to be those challenges. So if I frame them as opportunities, that makes it a whole lot easier for me to overcome them, to learn, to grow, and just to have a happier, easier, more enjoyable life, really.
Do you think like the way you frame those opportunities, like seeing them as opportunities, like you said, is that something that like your parents kind of nurtured, do you think?
No,
because not a lot of
so
people
much.
do.
I've had to overcome a lot of that because, I did grow up with, very loving parents that really wanted to protect me and keep me safe. And so growing up and even in school, I didn't try a lot of things. Like I wanted to be in the plays and I wanted to probably, I didn't even want to do sport because I was so scared of it because, my mum had fears around sport and things like that. And I can see that they were just trying to protect me and just trying to make life easy for me. But I'm actually someone now I know because I've done so much, work in self-development and trying to understand myself, that I am somebody that loves challenges. So it's an innate thing. Whenever I see a challenge, it elicits, the hormones that drive me. For me, that's like adrenaline and cortisol. And I'm like, okay, let's get going. My challenge is around consistency and finishing projects and doing sort of those monotonous things. So that's the real challenge for me. It's not so much, oh, here's a problem. I'm just naturally a solution oriented person. So I tend to find it, exciting.
So how long did you run the business for, the chocolate business?
I think it was really only about 3 years, I think, because then, I went through separation and, my ex-partner, he was the graphic designer for that. So the business was all kind of tied up together and I was really going through a fresh start for me. I was coming out, as a lesbian. I was, I'd separated from my ex-husband. And so it was really just this, that had to go. And the business had kind of gotten to this point where when I moved to Melbourne as well, I couldn't register a home kitchen there. So it was very different. There were a lot of different challenges and I wasn't loving it to the point. I didn't feel like it was my main thing. So I had this whole point of like, is this something that I want to view as an opportunity, or is this something that I need to let go? And, just through lots and lots of kind of tapping into my own intuition, I realized it was something that needed to let go. And, I can now see in hindsight, it was very scary at the time to let it go, but I can see in hindsight now that, there was something else that needed to come in. So I needed to make space for that.
Did you kind of take some time, obviously, you were finding yourself again to a degree, who you were.
Yeah.
Do you, was that a difficult time? Obviously, personally, you were going through a lot, I can only imagine. Professionally, did you kind of think, where do I fit again? You know what I mean? Like what's next?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a really challenging time if I look back on it. I was really in survival mode at that point. And so I just went back to teaching because that's what I knew was going to support myself and my son. So, I got a full-time job. I did take some time to kind of just regain my footing a little bit, and was very, very grateful for, the boost with Centrelink and the family payments and things like that. I feel very lucky to live in Australia and have access to those kinds of things because that's what I needed at that time. It was a very hard time for me financially because although my business was bringing in some money, like if I wasn't there, that money stopped. And so, I needed to rely on, the single parenting payments and food and petrol vouchers for a while, which really, really humbled me. And it was, one of those moments where it was like, take everything away, and what's kind of left, which I think really kick-started my journey of really finding myself and delving deep. But it was just really a survival mechanism thing. And I probably wouldn't have gone back to teaching if it wasn't for that, and eventually I did burn out again. which I knew was kind of coming. So, I knew that it wasn't something that was really the best thing for my health and well-being, but it was just a matter of making ends meet, which I know a lot of people have to do. That is the reality of, of living these days with such high costs. And sometimes even, when you've got your own business as well, having to have a part-time job or something until it's standing on its own.
And that's right. And there's no there shouldn't be any shame around that, I think, either, because we all have lifestyles and things that we need to bring money in to pay for. And it's like, well, I think some people can sometimes think, oh, I'm not doing good enough in that, and they kind of put that on themselves like a negative. There shouldn't be any shame or a negativity around that. It's just part of life.
There absolutely shouldn't. I definitely felt shame, and I really think it's something that not a lot of people talk about. I know that in your group, you provide a beautiful open space where we can talk about those kinds of things, and that's one of the things I love about it. But when you're sort of moving around in other circles, I still feel like so many of us have our masks on, and we feel this need to front up and act like everything's perfect, because God forbid we're human, and we've got some things going on that are challenging us. If you actually delve a little deeper, when you ask the questions and you build the trust with people, you find out everybody's got something that they're struggling with. We've all come across hard times, through various different ways. It could be financially, it could be relationship wise, it could be health, any number of things. And I think that, the work that Brené Brown's done has been amazing, in helping us to start talking about that and kind of taking those masks off. And, I just want to see more of that, where people are actually, connecting and being real.
Oh, 100%. And I love that, like, Brené Brown has started the conversation. And it's like the power. I'm doing a workshop, and I was writing a thing about the power of conversations just the other day. And it's like there is having openness around a topic, and, like I said, letting those guards down, it puts us all on an equal playing field. And it's like you don't need to worry about judgment. You don't need to worry about, financial things, whatever it is that you're worried about. We can all be on the same playing field, and that's when change actually happens.
Absolutely. And we saw that in COVID as well, when you could take away people's fancy suits and their cars and the offices and things like that. And we were, seeing everybody in their living rooms, and it didn't really matter what car you had, especially in Melbourne, because you couldn't go anywhere. So, that really leveled the playing field. So I think that kind of helped to accelerate it even further. But it does sort of feel in some areas that people have kind of just gone back and, gone back to default, which is normal. We all do that. It's human, but we're learning some lessons along the way. And I think we get those little reminders. I've certainly gotten those reminders lately with my health, and getting sick and things like that. And so it's just those things about, okay, let's not go back to those old ways that weren't serving us. Let's remember the lessons that we learned.
So how did you then transition from going back into teaching again to what you do now? And can you share what you do now? Because I find it fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I after, I think it was about a year and a half back in teaching, or maybe 2 years, including, some emergency teaching work and things like that, I burnt out again. And I got to the point I had chronic fatigue. So I was not able to even sort of like move from the couch to the front door without like losing breath. And I remember sort of trying to go to the zoo, on the school holidays with my son, and I just was moving so slowly. I had to take a seat all the time. And I just was, just so exhausted. And I had used up all of my sick leave. And so I had nothing left. And I just had to resign from my position because I just knew that I couldn't do it. And immediately after resigning, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders, and the energy started to come back to me. And so I thought, okay, well, obviously, my body is telling me that I can't do that job anymore. So I've got to find out what I am going to do, because, I've done a fair bit of self-development work now, but I need to go a little bit deeper into what that means for my career, and what am I meant to be doing? What can I do with the skills that I've got? And so that's when I got a coach, and she really, really helped me to sort of navigate and realizing that I wanted to do some work in coaching with adults. And I found, I think it was because I had delved into psychology and a lot of the deep stuff. She was a business coach. So when I found I was talking about the different things that I needed to do in business, and my own stuff kept coming up and my own limitations and my own fears. And she didn't have the ability to kind of hold space for that. And I realized that's where I can do things differently, because I have that background. You know, I'm a very nurturing and warm person. I'm very honest. I love humanity and I love the shadow side of people as well. You know, I've seen it all in teaching, you know, and I've had a pretty colorful life as well. And I can hold space for that. As that person is kind of navigating these business challenges, I can help them to grow into the person that they want to be able to meet those challenges. And so that was a point of difference where I was like, I could really do something here, and here's how I would do it differently. And so then I was just kind of coaching intuitively, and then I thought, oh, I better get some coaching training, even though I already had quite a lot under my belt with the psychology and the sociology and then the teaching and things like that. And then I went to a coaching school. I got some amazing models and things like that, but I found it a little bit frustrating because there was this kind of one way of thinking. Here's the right way of thinking. Here's the right way of being. Here's what you need to do. Here are the standards you need to meet. And I just felt like that didn't fit for everybody.
Yep.
And, you know, with my idea that everybody's an individual, and what I'd seen in teaching, people had different skills, and it just didn't sit right with me. I tried it for a little while, and then I was kind of whinging about it to a friend, and she said, oh, you should look at this epigenetics course that I did. I think you'd really like it, because it's really all about what you're saying there, that, you know, people are different, and this explains why they're different. And so I went and looked, and I had a chat to some people. I jumped into the course, and then I was just like, oh my goodness, like as I was listening to them talk about it, I was like, this is the language and the science behind what I've always noticed about humans. I'm a real people watcher, and I'm like, why is that person different to that person? Why do we look different? Why do we behave differently? Why do we see things differently? And this gave language to all of that. So the epigenetics is really the study of our genes and how the environment impacts our genes. So the thing is, like, you know, we've made up by our parents, you know, our biological parents, and they give us our genes, and that's about 3 to 5% of who we actually are. You know, the 95 to 97% is actually how our environment impacts our genes. So you can get two twins that, you know, essentially have the same DNA, and they can have a very different lifestyle, very different kind of interests, and their body can develop very differently depending on what choices they're making in their lifestyle and what environmental factors are impacting them. And so I went, oh, this is amazing, you know. And I really felt in that course that they really encouraged us to be our true selves. And so, you know, I'm a real verbal express. I love, you know, coming on podcasts and things like that. And every time they'd ask a question, you know, there'd be those people sitting there that, you know, didn't want to put their hand up or didn't want to share anything. And I was just raring to go. So sometimes I'd wait for, you know, like 30 seconds or something, and I'd be like, nobody's answering questions, or nobody's asking anything, no one's contributing. And so I'd come off mute and I'd say, you know, oh, I know I've talked a lot already. And they said, that's okay. We know that you need to express verbally, so you go for it.
In so many situations in life, you know, we do the right thing. You know, as kids, we're taught, you speak when you're spoken to, you don't, you know, kind of interject, and you let other people speak, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, here's an environment where your contributions are valued.
Yes, absolutely. And for those people that don't want to speak as well, or need a little bit more time to process their thoughts so that they can feel ready to speak, that was respected as well. And so it was, you know, for the people that wanted a bit more data and a bit more science of things, that was there, that was available for it. They had different ways to work through the material based on each individual's kind of biology. And so I just loved that they had this differentiated model, which was what I was trying to do in teaching as well. But the system, I was in the mainstream system, and it just didn't allow for that, certainly not for, if the teacher wasn't going to burn out. I tried to do it and differentiate for each child, but it was really difficult, but that's actually what we need as humans. We need, to understand that we're all different, that, we have individual strengths. And actually, when we work to those strengths and we allow space for people to share their strengths within a team, that's actually how we work as a healthy ecosystem. If you look at nature and the way that, animals will help each other, it's like a symbiotic relationship. That's how we're supposed to be as humans. And some teams that we work with, do that really well, and some not so much, and I know that, within the entrepreneurship community as well, we sometimes feel like we have to be all rounders and we have to do everything ourselves. And sometimes we do, that's just, how the situation is. And that's where we can get into burnout as entrepreneurs as well. But, we know the power of outsourcing and collaborating and, leaning on other people for support and playing to our strengths. And so, that's what we educate on now.
How long kind of, it sounds like when you first had a coach, so sort of at the start of that sort of journey of finding what you were going to do, like you sort of had the mindset that you were going to open a business. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think having the chocolate business, that really showed me that I could do that. That was pretty successful. I think coaching has been a little bit more challenging, but, I've also had a lot going on during that time as well, and known that I needed to balance those things. So that's kind of a bit more of a circumstantial thing. But yeah, it was in 2018 that I burnt out from teaching and then decided to sort of go down that path of having my own business again. And I think for me, that just feels really right. I do work well within a team, but I also work well, on my own independently. So I think it really helps me because I'm such an out of the box thinker and I'm quite innovative. It can be a little bit challenging if I'm under authority. So, it does help for me to be able to work with people. And that's, even last year, finding my business partner who, is trained in the same way that I am. It's really helped because we're a similar biology, but, our psychology is slightly different. And that's where we get that individuality from. And she has really helped encourage me. And it's just been so much more fun to do things together as well and to play to our strengths, because I was finding it very, very hard to do all the operations side of it. And she was finding it very hard to do the networking side of it. And so we both just get to live in our strengths.
Did you have any fear that before you brought your business partner on, did you kind of have had any fear in that process of what if this doesn't work out? You know what I mean? Like, how we're up for a challenge and we do our best, but there's a little voice at the side, at the back of our head kind of going, well, what are you going to do if it doesn't work?
Absolutely. I still have it almost every day. I just recognize it. I'm very aware of it. And so I externalize it. I bring that voice out and I'm like, oh, there's that old thing again. Some days I'm on top of the world and I'm feeling really fantastic. And I know which kind of things I need to do to help me with that. If I'm food and exercise are two big things for me. It's not as much of a big deal for other people of different biology, but those are two really big things. And the social connection is really huge. So if I've got those three things kind of down pat, then I'm usually on top of the world and I'm feeling really confident. Unless I'm going up against something big, I'm trying something new. That's when that kind of inner critic voice can come in, and I can start to doubt things. I can see things through a bit of a negative lens, but I notice so often that it's like my environmental factors that will completely color the lens that I'm seeing things through. So, if I've had a really indulgent weekend and I've eaten all the yummy things, I know for my body that impacts me greatly. And I might come into work, on Monday and I'm feeling a little bit sheepish and I'm like, oh, I'm no good. There's so much more that I need to be doing, and I'll have that inner critic running. But I'm so aware that that's all it is. And so I can go, oh, that's probably just because I've kind of, tipped the scales, too far one way on the weekend. And so I know what to do to get myself back on track. And then, I'm feeling good again.
Do you sometimes find, because there's so much self-awareness in what you experience. Is that exhausting at times for yourself, not for other people, when you're kind of looking at yourself?
I think that's one thing I really love. It's my curious mind, and I want to go deeper and deeper. It's not so much exhausting for me. I think for me, I can get a little bit obsessed with it. And so I'll just want to find out more, and I'll go so deep, and I can get very distracted in that world and then leave other things that are more important. So I have to that's me learning that consistency and balance and things like that. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm working with on for myself at the moment. But I think self-awareness is, I know for people with my type of biology, we're very interested in the self, in learning about ourselves. For other people, they're more interested in others and learning about others, and then there's other types of people that are really interested in their mission, and their purpose at work. And so that might be what they're really delving into. So it's probably something that I've just really accepted about myself.
Yeah.
But I imagine it looks exhausting to other people, and I've had other people sort of say to me, oh, why do you worry about that? And I can see for them, it's just not of interest to them. They might really be into like gaming or something like that, or, really love books, or, interested in a particular field of study. Yeah. So, but like the self and self-awareness is really something I'm interested in. Yeah.
It's really interesting because I think many of us go, like, circumstance leads us to our to running a business. So possibly not those that sort of set out to run a business in their life, but kind of due to incidents or challenges, we kind of fall into business ownership, which is kind of how I sort of see my own situation. And I had no idea about the self-development that this journey would take me on. And it's kind of like, I used to be the type of person, Casey, you wouldn't have probably liked me very much. I used to be the type of person that would go into a bookshop. I love reading, but I'd go into a bookshop and I'd see all the self-development section, right? And I'd walk past going, oh, whatever, wasting money, blah, blah. But now, like, knowing what I'm facing, what I will continue to face on my journey, I embrace it. But I had no idea that this is a result of just running a business, like having a job, and this is what I do.
Yeah. I think as humans in a post-industrial revolution world, we get so obsessed with the doing, and we can hang so much on that. And I think it's changing quite rapidly now, where we're really understanding a lot of it is about the being and who we're being. And that's where I really want to see a bit more of a shift, a bit more nuance and complexity, that it's not about being like the successful people out there, that you have to join the 5 a.m. club and do all the Wim Hof things and stuff like that. Like that doesn't equal success. It might have worked for that person because it was right for them, but I'd love to see more nuance of people understanding themselves and working out, okay, well, who do I need to be in terms of being the best version of themselves? What does that actually mean, rather than actually just trying to model somebody else? Because there's a lot in the coaching industry that tells you to model excellence, and a lot in the self-development world that is like, here's how I did it, you can do it, here are the steps. And I think that can be really harmful, because what I know from epigenetics is that the steps are different for every single person. And that can vary as well, depending on what circumstances they're going through in life, depending on where their body is at and their mind is at that particular moment. So I really would love to see, my dream is really for everybody to kind of develop that level of self-understanding, that they know themselves, and so they don't get so caught up or influenced by what's on Instagram, or what advice somebody else is saying on a Facebook group, or what their parents are telling them, or that sort of thing. They know themselves to that level, that they really can stand firm and go, okay, well, that's great if that works for you, but I know that's not going to work for me.
Accepting your own definition of success.
Absolutely. You said it so much more succinctly than I did. Professional waffler.
I remember going on the LinkedIn profile. That's what a podcast is. Keep waffling. I love it.
Love it.
So, Casey, what sort of clients do you help? Because this is something that epigenetics is something that not many people know about. Can you kind of share the sort of people and the sort of problems that that come to you and that you can help with?
Yeah, absolutely. So as somebody that loves variety, it's a real mixed bag. So, we work in organizations, both private and government now. We've just actually been approved as a provider for government, so we can start to do more work with the federal government, that is. So that's really exciting. So we work with teams, all kinds of teams. And for me, really, it doesn't really matter what they're doing or what the business is, because I'm interested in humans. And if I can help humans to become more aware, then I'm living my purpose. So there is some kind of organizations that we're working with, but then I also really love working with entrepreneurs, because exactly what you said, Danielle, they're coming up against these challenges and learning how to overcome them and having to be more self-aware. And usually, it's often a heart-led business, not always with women, but especially with women, I find that they, are doing something that is passion-filled. It might be because they're providing for their family, or it could just be something that is for them, something that they want to do for their own identity, or they might have a really big mission to impact the world in a positive way. And where I can facilitate that by just helping them to make some little changes here and there, to make their lives easier, more enjoyable, more, sometimes it can be more productive, but, more so it depends on what that person is after. I really want to find, what's their word, what are the things that it's going to help them with. So I tend to work with, when it's one-to-one, it tends to be usually entrepreneurs or, people, with like small businesses, or they're kind of doing their own thing. Sometimes it's around transitioning out of corporate or, out of an employment role as well. Sometimes people are going through divorce, or, their kids are starting to grow up and they're like, okay, I don't really know who I am without this identity. So I do a lot of work, on that identity piece and authenticity, and understanding individuality. And then, it is kind of around, okay, well, how do you want your life and your career to look? And what can you bring to the table there? So really understanding their strengths. And a lot of that work is kind of undoing the conditioning, because so many of us were taught that, our strengths were weaknesses. And so there's quite a bit of work to be done there, and that crosses over between, the entrepreneurs, and the organisations that we're working with. We're working with a school in New South Wales at the moment, and really supporting the teachers to, be as healthy as they possibly can, and to be the leaders that they want to be. And we've had some amazing aha moments. A big one was around that conditioning piece just this week, where we were teaching around, because when they work with us, they understand their ideal self from a biological perspective. But we have had decades worth of conditioning, from our parents, from teachers, from society, from the media, from everything. And so when we look at, what our biological profile is and what our capabilities are, looking at our strengths and how we use our brain and which hormones are driving us and things like that, there can be a real kind of gap between who we think we are versus who we can actually be. And so there's a big piece around unpacking that and going, well, these were just messages that I was told, and then I formed them into beliefs. So, which parts of those do I want to keep, which are serving me, and which do I want to let go? And that's a big part of what we do, and we just show them little ways that they can do that. And a big part of what we do is doing it in a slow way as well, because that's what actually, helps the habit change to form. It's not about overhauling things. It's about doing things at your own pace, because that's really important too.
What an honor it is for you to be by someone's side during that transformation.
Yeah, it really is. I get chills on the regular. I have these physical responses in my body when someone gets that moment. And what I often hear, Danielle, and this is kind of my aim for each thing, they get to a point where they go, oh, so there's nothing wrong with me. And I'm like, there it is. And it's like, whenever they say that, I just get this rush of like oxytocin in my body that I'm just like, yes, you have finally started to see your own worth. So, I had a beautiful client that has a business around sustainability, and she came to me, and she had been doing a lot of work on health and self-development. So she was already really clued up, and she came to me and she just said, I just want to be the best I can so that I can really achieve my mission. I want to do this, I want to create a better world for my daughter. And I want this to, I want to be at my best for that. And she got to that point where she just had so much more confidence at the end of it, because she was like, I'm amazing. She understood her strengths. We'd done a lot of work on reframing her weaknesses to strengths. And then she just felt more confident. And that went into like her copy for her website. She knew how to talk about herself. And she's just, flying now. So it's just beautiful to see people to really blossom, and that's what I did, when I was teaching. I'd, have these students that had been thinking that there was something wrong with them, but I show them their strengths, and then they just wanted to come to school. And so I used to have parents coming in crying, just saying, oh, it's so much easier now, because once upon a time they wouldn't leave the house, and now they just can't wait to get to school. Thank you so much. And I just think every human needs that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm kind of, as you're speaking, I'm kind of thinking about, especially when you said the word identity a little while back as well. So my kids are now 11 and 13. And so, they're sort of finishing up primary school, getting into high school. They're growing in independence. And even though I've been running She'll Shine, I've been doing my own thing, and I do have my identity wrapped up into that as well. It's kind of, like I'm kind of feeling like a shift. And I've had conversations with a lot of my good friends about it too. And it's like, I feel like I found myself once they were born, again, like I found myself kind of as the mother role there. But then now, as they're needing me less, and I'm kind of seeing, well, I've still got half of my life ahead of me. What do I want from that? There's another identity shift that I'm in the midst of.
Yeah. As I mentioned to you, I think before we started recording, it's a cyclical process. We go through so many identity shifts throughout our life, even as we develop, psychologically, and physically, that, our identity is changing all the time. And, that's one of the things that we work on with epigenetics as well. Like, after this conversation, I will be a different person, and after I, have a big drink of water, or, smell, a beautiful rose or something like that, that is changing me every single moment. All of these different influences that we have are changing us. So you can imagine then, when we look at like, being a parent or being a business owner, how much that changes us, and so a lot of us, we reinforce that a lot of the time, because when we're talking to people and when they, ask us to tell them about ourselves, all of those words, are really going back into our brain and telling us. So, when someone retires, or when their children are leaving the nest and things like that, there's some big identity shifts there that can happen, and there's grief around that as well, which is completely normal, but it can be really, really challenging. So, whatever we could do, and I'm just one of the practitioners that are doing these kinds of things. People do it. There are plenty of other people that do it with epigenetics, and there are plenty of other people that do it with different ways as well, different modalities and things. So I think it's wonderful that there are people there that can support and guide. I feel like that's really what humans need. We need to stand together as we're going through that.
And I think also, just like we're saying in these conversations, knowing that you're not alone, that you're not going through, everyone goes through their own different challenges, they're in their own different journeys, etc. But there's so many similarities. Like we find that within our community, we have women of all different backgrounds, different experiences, but there's some common challenges that we all face. And I think in having the conversations and normalizing those challenges, it can make such a difference. And it's like, oh no, and there's people out there who can help me as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it's the power of storytelling as well. And even what you're doing with this podcast too, sharing stories are so important. This is how we've evolved as humans. This is how our brains have evolved, and it's how we connect. We've connected through stories and, oral stories for so much longer than we've had the written word as well. And so, there's a lot coming back to that. The marketing industry has gotten back onto that, gotten on board with that, and we're understanding the power of story, and I've had it, even just this week with a group that I've been working with. I had somebody reach out to me personally and said, thank you so much for sharing your story. We felt that there was, they weren't really getting it. It was a time to kind of be a bit vulnerable in there and start to share our stories. And that was the connection piece for them. And this person that had been really struggling to kind of get their head around, what they were learning, that was the piece that really landed for them, and they had always thought that it was something wrong with them and they were just a misfit. But hearing my story about that really helped them to understand that they weren't alone, and the factors that were at play there as to why they felt like a misfit. And so I think, the power of sharing stories and connecting is just phenomenal. So that's why I'm part of She Will Shine.
Yeah, I love it. But that's true. And I think, we need to remember that, as we said earlier, showing vulnerability is not a weakness. And I think it also gives permission for the other person to also, share and show their vulnerability. And I think that's been, like, as you know, through She'll Shine, like that's where such beautiful, genuine connections and conversations happen.
Absolutely. I've always felt held in your community, and able to be sort of open. And I think it's, it's a beautiful space for doing that. So thank you so much for creating it.
Oh, thank you, Casey. That's a beautiful note to end on. I'm all teary now.
Good. If I could give you elicit some of the feels today, then I've done my job.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Casey. We have been talking about having you on the podcast for such a long time, and I am so, so glad that we got a chance to chat today. I know, when I first met you and you shared what you did, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I've got to find out more. And I've, as I said, I've always been fascinated by what you do. And I really appreciate you sharing that with our community as well, because I think, it's really important for them to know that support is out there for them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you, as it always is. Thank you for inviting me to share my story, and what it is that I do, the change that I'm creating in the world. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Casey as much as I did. And we will see you next time on the She Will Shine podcast.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode of the She Will Shine podcast, we invite you to check out shewillshine.com.au. She Will Shine is the essential support network you need to grow a thriving, meaningful business. We can help you grow your network, connect and develop genuine relationships, be supported, and support others in building and growing a successful business on your terms. Say goodbye to working alone and become a member at shewillshine.com.au.